Okay, let's see if we can get this. Share a screen. All right, are you seeing that all right?
Looks good.
Super excellent. Let me move the stupid Zoom thing out of the way. All right, so sorry, I want to make this bigger so I can see the audience as well. Um, and I tend to think the answers are going to be a little easy here, but I start out with a little bit of a few questions. First, my name is Paige Watson. I'm a technical coach currently with Salesforce. I've been in the industry for forever, 35 plus years as a developer, mostly in the last few years as a technical coach. Although when I was a developer, I was doing those technical coaching things as well. Right. I, oh, excuse me. Um, how many people have heard of the term of deliberate practice before? Yeah, I figured pretty much everybody here. But I think it's important to know, right? It's when I talk about deliberate practice, it's actually sort of a framework around how we practice. Um, you know, we should be practicing writing our code. How many people do that? Not just as sort of after work or on your own time, but how many people practice writing code as part of your production hour work? Yeah, less like you set aside time during the day, whether it be once a week or more to practice. Yeah, okay.
Kind of.
All right. Um, so I want to start out with some myths about learning. And you often hear these, and there are probably more than I'm going to bring up, but I want to talk about three in particular. Right? The first one is that practice is really only for beginners, right? Practice is a way to maintain your skills, and really, it's the only way to get better. Sure, we get better by doing a little bit, and I'll talk about that as we go through. But if you really want to grow and get better, you need to practice, right? The other one is practice makes perfect, which is total nonsense. Because even though it sounds great and it's really easy to say, there's an alliteration there that's pretty excellent. But if you practice badly, you learn to you basically get worse, or you reinforce those bad practices that you're doing. So practice doesn't make perfect. Perfect practice makes perfect. I don't know if I know what perfect practice is, but good practice makes better. How about that? Um, and then finally, I kind of touched on this that you get better by doing. And this is one of those things I'll talk about when we on the next slide, but you get better little by little by doing. You don't get a lot better. And sure, you're a lot better typing than you were when you started out in this industry. But if I challenge you right now to type 200 words a minute in a month and I'd give you $2 million, what would you do? Would you just go back and keep working, work harder as it would be? Or would you'd probably get a typing tutor program. You'd probably focus on AD, ASD, ASDF, ASDFG, and like getting your fingers moving quicker, following that typing tutor. You're deliberately practicing because it's not just about doing, right? And there's a science behind that. And that science is called the learning performance distinction. It's part of behaviorism, right? And it's the difference is basically that when you are performing, you're creating output and production is increased, and you're gaining some knowledge, but it's not being put into your long-term memory. There's some short-term learning, there's some general learning, but if you really want to grow and get better at something, you need to get out of performing section and get into learning. And when you're in the learning mode, your output is diminished, right? Because that's okay. You're making mistakes. You're focusing on the learning and not the output. And this is where your permanent knowledge growth really happens, the long-term knowledge growth. You can kind of think of it, I use the IO stream, where really your brain can only use one at a time and only one way, right? You're either performing or you're learning. Let's see. So this is really based on a book by Kay Anders Erickson called Peak: The Secrets of the New Science Expertise. It's I enjoyed it, but I'm not sure that most people would. It's pretty dry book, um, but it's a good book. And if this is sort of interesting to you, um, I would recommend you check it out. He talks about how we learn, and really the ideas behind it kind of come a lot from him. Um, and so this is kind of the how. The other part of this is the why. And why do we want to learn? Why do we want to practice? Daniel Kahneman wrote a book called Thinking Fast and Slow. Again, another great book, could be dry, could not be everybody's cup of tea, definitely not a story, but is an interesting read and talks about this idea that we have two kind of parts of our brain. We have the fast brain and we have the slow brain. And that fast brain is that instinctual, emotional, like, oh, I touched a hot plate, I'm going to jerk back. Or, if I say the words Donald Trump, you have a reaction, and whether it's good or bad or indifferent, that's not up for me to say, and it's not what we're going to talk about here. But you have a reaction immediately to that emotional reaction, right? That's the fast brain. The slow brain is a deliberate and logical brain. This is the one that kicks in when I ask you to multiply 12 times 5. Even if we know that, or 2 plus 2 even, we know the answer, but we still have to put it into our slow brain and do the logic, right? Whether that logic is actually doing the math or just retrieving the answer from a section of our brain. We talk about it like a hard drive, but that's the slow brain. And what I really want to do with this, and what I really want to get out of practice, is I want to move my coding instincts or skills more closer to the fast brain side, right? I want to I'm never going to move them into the fast brain side, but I want to move them closer. And this is kind of why we do this practice. So if deliberate practice is the how, this is the why. Also, some great comments. Feel free to jump in and ask questions and that sort of thing. I like to have discussions a lot more than I like to just sit and talk. So please let me know if you have a comment or a question on it as well. So let's talk about putting this into practice, right? There are some basic rules around deliberate practice to kind of make it deliberate. The first one is don't go it alone, right? When I say don't go it alone, you kind of need to have someone that can answer questions or guide you when you need it. You can kind of think of this person as a coach or a teacher. It doesn't necessarily mean that they need to be right there. It could be, or they need to even be the subject matter expert, or an expert, whatever. This can be another person you're working with. This could be the rest of your team, but it's someone that maybe has a little bit more knowledge, or has done this before, and can answer questions, give you feedback fairly quickly when you're going down a road and you kind of get stuck. So don't go it alone. Be uncomfortable. When we learn, we have to step outside our comfort zone. We'll never learn anything that's easy, right? We'll never get better at anything that's easy. The reason it's easy is because we've done it enough that we're better at it. You want to be able to sort of push yourself. The important part also here is you don't want to go too far outside your comfort zone. That'll have the reverse effect. Continually banging your head against the wall. with something you don't understand is going to be frustrating, and it's going to slow you down, and you're going to give up, and you're not really going to learn anything. So you want to move just a little bit outside of your comfort zone to where you're unsure but able to understand and learn. So pick one thing, preferably something small. You know, if I was tasked to write an OAuth library in Fortran, I wouldn't get anywhere because I don't know OAuth libraries very much, and I certainly don't know Fortran. And the learning curve is so steep that I'm not going to really, I'm not really going to get anywhere with my learning. So I'd probably end up giving up. Instead, if I wanted to practice this, I would pick something simpler, just slightly out of my comfort zone. Maybe I do FizzBuzz a lot, so maybe I would write FizzBuzz in Fortran. I'd try and understand, oh, I see how it compiles. I see here's what the syntax is. Here's the tool I need maybe, but or maybe I interact with an OAuth library in a language I know and kind of get to understand, oh, I'm going to pass this secret, and I should get back this token, whatever. But don't go too far outside, and pick that one thing to focus on when you're practicing. Right? You need fast and effective and actionable feedback. Babies learning to walk get that feedback right away. Right? That they take a step and they know whether they fall down or not. They know whether they're doing the right thing. And then they take another step and they relearn, and they keep putting that into their brain. Maybe they're not necessarily focused on practicing, but they're getting that effective feedback. I often talk about my dad, who grew up in Whittier, Alaska, which, if you are not familiar with it, it's the middle of nowhere, pretty literally. Um, and he took driver's ed by correspondence. And yeah, I know, it's awesome. What's the problem with that? He's a fine, okay driver now, but the problem is that he would take a test, a written test, put it in the mail. It would go, at the time, years ago, it would take like a week plus to get to Oklahoma. I think University of Oklahoma was where he was doing it. And then they would take a week or two to correct it, and then they would put it back in the mail, another week or two to come back. And in the meantime, he's taken another test, in that month and a half that he's waiting for that feedback. And what he was finding was that he was getting the original test back, and there were questions that he got wrong. And there were questions that he got wrong on the next test too, that were the same basic question. But because he wasn't able to get that feedback in time, he didn't really get a chance to learn that he had made a mistake and correct it for the next test, right? So we want fast, actionable feedback, and clear feedback, right? If I could tell you, oh, test failed, and I could tell you that in a few seconds, but if I don't know why my test failed, I don't get it's not clear. Um, So failure needs to be an option. It has to be okay to fail when learning. That's really the only way that we learn, by seeing the outcome, by getting that feedback, and changing something about our input and trying it again, right? We talk about that learning performance distinction. Often teams talk about, when they want to practice, they think, oh, I'm going to grab this code that we've been working on, and let's all get together and let's practice it, practice on working on something in production. And you can't do that. You can't do that. And the reason is because you don't give yourself that opportunity to fail. Even if you know we're going to make a branch and we're going to throw away the branch at the end, there's still something back in your brain that says, gosh, if this works, I could commit this, right? And so we don't want to sort of extend ourselves into that uncomfortable place where we can fail and learn, because we might be able to use this, right? So if we're talking about practicing software development, I always recommend that that we practice on a kata or something that is not production code, right? We could write the same thing over and over again. We could continue to build an application or something, a project, whatever, but it can't be something that is directly connected to your job, or else that separation of learning and performance won't happen. And finally, it seems really weird that I have to say this, but you have to want to learn. There has to be a want to learn and to grow. Have you ever been told that you were going to have to go take a mandatory class at work? Right? And how much did you get out of that class? Like everybody, at the place where I work, you get 50 people in the room, and 48 of them have their cameras off. Because it's mandatory, there's a big chance that they're not even listening, much less taking part. So you really only learn when you want to be there, right? Um, that's really important. So let's talk a little about how we can apply this, what exercises we can use knowing those rules around deliberate practice. I like Code Katas a lot. Um, I think Code Katas are fine for, excuse me. Code Katas are fine for practicing. They the caveat with that is you aren't there to try and solve the problem, right? We talk about that, pick one thing. If we're picking to solve the problem, and I've seen this many times where teams are like, yeah, we're going to do a code kata together, and we do it, and then next week let's do another code kata, a different one, and then well, let's just run down all the elite code katas that we can find. What are we really learning? Well, honestly, we're learning to solve the problem, which is awesome if that's what you want to focus on. But that's what I do every day at work. That's what we as developers, that's our job. So if we wanted to focus on simpler design, like the 4 rules of simple design, or we wanted to focus on learning some, hexagonal architecture or writing better tests, we can't do a different kata each time, right? You stick with one and you practice it. Uh, Code dojos are also a really good one. Code dojos are a little bit longer than katas, and they're kind of interchangeable, just depending on who's running them and what you're doing with them. They tend to be more refactoring based from what I've seen. Awesome. If that's exciting and something you guys want to focus on, then use Code dojos. And the third is Sparrow decks, which I love. How many people have heard of Sparrow decks before? Oh, good. Fabulous. Maybe we'll have time to do 1 or 2 or 5 or 20. Sparrow decks were created by a really great coach and friend of mine named Llewellyn Falco. And they are relaxed repetition. And we'll get into it a little bit more, but the whole idea is that we're going to train ourselves more around code smells and learning to sort of see them. So it's a really great practice, and it's a way of playing with the mind. And so I always like doing them because they're kind of fun. I'm gonna stop a second. Any questions or comments while we're here? Okay, great. Feel free to raise your hand or just jump in. When we do a code kata, I like to actually, I have a lot of lists of rules. I like to put a couple rules around them. And mainly because, again, it sort of helps us in practice the learning aspect as opposed to just writing code for no reason or, kind of going willy-nilly everywhere. One of those, the first one is that you want to have a primary focus. We talked about this with the deliberate practice. Write that focus down, whether it be on the whiteboard or in chat or whatever, we are going to practice. We're going to do this code kata, and we're going to practice code conveys intent. We're going to make sure everything that we write conveys its intent in a way that everybody else understands exactly what's going on. Or we're going to practice writing this in an object-oriented way without primitives, right? But whatever that focus is, write it down, right? Simplest solution. When you're doing a code kata, the very simplest, quickest, and dirtiest way of writing that kata or writing that code to make it work is the correct way, right? Number 3 is anything goes. As long as you follow rules 1 and 2, you stick to the primary focus and you do the quickest and dirtiest thing, then anything's acceptable. And finally, working software wins. When you prove your code works, you're done. So this, in my case, is usually all your tests pass. And you've thought of all the different permutations of the tests and the edge cases and whatever. But working software wins. So with that in mind, I often we use these to focus teams when I work with them around doing katas. What are some of those katas that work really well? FizzBuzz. Everybody knows FizzBuzz. Really simple. Yeah, it's a great problem because it's a simple problem with 4 requirements. And once you solve it once, maybe twice, you don't have to solve the problem anymore. You can get out of thinking about solving the problem and you can start to think about, how are we going to write FizzBuzz today? Should we pass an object in and get a fizz or a buzz or a FizzBuzz object out? Should we write it in Go? Should we write it in Elixir? I've never written Elixir, but I know how to solve FizzBuzz, so I don't have to think about solving it. I can think about the syntax and writing in Elixir, right? So again, one focus, and I love it. It's a really great problem. It originally comes from a drinking game in college. I don't know if you all knew that, but I was talking at Bellevue College last night, which is our local college. Having our Seattle code crafters meet up in person there, and I was like, of all the students here, who knew that? And nobody raised their hand, and I felt really old, so that's okay, I guess. Gilded Rose, if you haven't touched Gilded Rose or looked at it before, it's the most horrible code ever, but it's a fabulous refactoring practice. It's just a giant if-else tree of doom all over. But again, if your focus is refactoring, Gilded Rose is a fabulous one to practice. Because again, once you solve it a few times, you understand you don't have to think about solving the problem. You can start to focus on more, focus on other areas. And then Game of Life, we use Game of Life in the Global Day of Code retreat. We do that. It's a simple, maybe it's less simple than the other 2, but it's that, you have a cell on an infinite grid, and the cell, if it has a certain number of neighbors, it lives or dies depending on the number of neighbors. We use this one really good because it's great for practicing design, collaboration, and sort of algorithmic strategies. Those are 3 I could recommend. There's lots of other ones, right? All right, let's go. Oh, so I talked a little about code, about Sparrow decks. Sparrow decks are created by Llewellyn Falco. It's a relaxed repetition of visualizing code smells, and I'm pretty sure we'll have time to do one, so that's excellent because they are fairly fun, and when you start to do them, you're like, oh, that's crazy that they work. So there's a link and such here. All this stuff is available on my website as well, so you can download and click all the links and stuff. there's some pitfalls and anti-patterns to deliberate practice, right? I've kind of touched on a few of them, but one of the biggest problems is practicing solutions. I was talking about like, let's try a new code kata every time, right? You're learning to come up with solutions. You're learning to figure out the problem. And if that's your focus, that's great. But if it's not, we, especially as I'm assuming most of us are in the United States, we tend to want to go to the new and exciting next thing. I studied martial art for many years, and my sensei from Japan said one time, he's like, "Boy, I ask you guys to do something, and everybody gets up and they do it 4 times or they do it 8 times, and then they sit down and they're ready, like, okay, teach us the next thing." In Japan, you just do it and do it, and you do 100 times or 200 times. You just do it over and over and over, looking to kind of master that one little skill, right? And so get out of that need to find something new, or at least a new problem, and find something new in the problem that you've been doing. The hippo is a really important one to be aware of, especially if you're facilitating some sort of learning time with your team. The hippo is the highest paid person problem, and that's your senior architect, whatever person that's like, well, we should always write it this way, right? That then immediately influences everybody else to do what they're asking, what this person is saying, and it sort of defeats the idea of learning time. The better way to deal with that is to, you know, when as a coach, when I deal with us, I usually ask that person to try not to speak until everybody else has voiced an opinion, and let everybody else kind of figure out the answer that you already know, whether or not I would believe their answer is correct or not, but sort of bring that person in on the on the learning side, and sort of lean on them to ask them for help, and really let everybody, you really want to sort of say nothing is wrong here. Everybody's points and everybody's ideas about how to solve this or how to move forward with this problem is valid. And because it's okay that we're going to fail, because we're in learning time and not in production time, we're going to fail, we're going to make some mistakes. Let's figure it out. And then the done it. You'll see people who have been like, oh yes, I know FizzBuzz. I did this the other day. Here's what you do. I ran into this myself last night when I was talking about code quality and such. I was taught we did FizzBuzz, and I just went down a path. Immutable. We pass the ID. We pass the integer into the constructor. We don't pass anything, and we call convert and we get the value back. And someone said, why don't we pass the value into the convert function? And why isn't this static? And other things. And I'm like, no, because we never do that, and that's horrible. And like, oh, no, actually, maybe you have a point there, right? And then I twisted it around, so I was talking more about how we collaborate as a team than my failings as an instructor in that case. But yeah, really the done it. I've seen this before. I know what the answer is, right? Okay, try and get out of that. Try and wrap that around to like, okay, let's try and do it a different way. Yeah, and that's what I got. Here's some links and stuff. I don't know why I didn't put my repository one on here. I actually have a repository where I keep all of this. Again, another great Llewellyn Falco practice. All of my talks are in GitHub. You can go to my GitHub account, and actually, I think the QR code links you there, and you can find resources for this talk and the slide deck and that sort of thing. So, if you'd like, we could try out some Sparrow decks, or I could take some Q&A as well.
And Paige, if you share that link with me, I'll post it in the meetup chat or comment
Sure.
section for this talk.
Sure. Okay. So I'm going to stop sharing for a minute. And thoughts, feedback, questions?
I have a question if nobody else has one. I have to be
Yeah.
careful what I say because I work with JC and he might out me. But um, so one of the rules of practice that you talked about was wanting to learn. And so
Yes.
where I work now, we have some dedicated learning time every week, which is awesome. Um, but another developer and I we're kind of in charge of it right now. And one of the things that we're kind of struggling with is sometimes people have they don't have a super strong desire to learn. Are there things that you have found to be effective to help cultivate that desire?
Not, well, I tend to go about it and say it's all optional. You don't have to join us. But also when we do learning time, less in person, or I mean less now because we're not in person all the time. But when we were in person, we did learning time right in the middle of the desks, right in the middle of everybody's of the office, right? And so you could see who was not there. There was a little bit of peer pressure that came up, and that like, oh, all these people are at learning time and I'm typing away. And it's you get the early adopters, you get the late adopters, you get the laggards, whatever. The whole idea is just to make it visible, right? And hopefully eventually those people will come around. There oftentimes I've seen a lot of places where they feel pressured to continue working like this is not something that I'm comfortable with because they might not think I'm producing as much as I can. And that's a really hard one to get out of. Uh, maybe get the manager to join you. Although there's sort of drawbacks with that as well, right? And I say that because there's a weird thing where you don't want to make a mistake in front of your manager, right? So I don't want to say the wrong thing, and so nobody speaks up, and then you get the hippo effect again because the manager is the only one speaking. On the other hand, I've had many teams I've worked with their management and their senior management and even the CEO are like, yes, you guys should be learning and growing, and you get 4 hours a week of time that you shouldn't be developing code for production, but you should be, sharpen the axe type time. And everybody's like, yeah, yeah, I know they said that, but I don't want to look like I'm not working, and so the easy answer is no, I don't really have a way to fix that. The harder answer is yes, but it's a long, slow process sometimes. And, there's a lot of tricks. How, maybe you go to that person and say, gosh, I know you're really good with the UI because that's what you work on. We were going to do some stuff with UI this week. Could you come help us? Because we're not sure which way to go. Like you sort of employ them and put them in a spot. This is a lot of times I see like senior people who have been there for years and sort of don't want to be seen as having to learn, right? They're supposed to know everything. There's a fear there. And when you put it in that term of, gosh, we really need your help. You're the one with a lot of knowledge. Could you show up and just help us walk through this, right? Maybe that can bring them in. It's yeah. I don't anybody else have thoughts on that?
Yeah, I was going to mention one thing, and I'm actually working on an upcoming talk around this practice of practice, which is called Etudes. You may have heard of it, but essentially to answer the question about people that don't want to learn, if it's a team practice, right, and you kind of as a manager or whatever make it a thing that's like a forced participation. This is part of what we do. It's like stand up. It's like whatever, of the normal practices, I think people come around, right? The value is evident once you start doing it. You get better at whatever it is, that you're practicing, and people see that and start to buy into it. Yeah, so I think it's a tough thing. All the stuff that you mentioned come into play, right? Like feeling vulnerable is a
Yeah.
really tough one. Senior people thinking, oh, I'm gonna have to do something that's gonna expose, something that I don't know. Those things are problematic, but there are some techniques around it. And yeah, I think, I'm going to talk about them in my talk. So, but I think there's a lot of different ways to make it so that it's comfortable for folks. You mentioned a great one page about not doing work in it,
Yeah.
right? So that's a huge thing, right? Make it something that's not related to the work, but maybe helps in the work, or make
Good.
it something that everybody knows, or that, there's a general feeling that everybody's bad at, right? So it's not a thing that it's like, oh, the senior guys are going to be good at this, or the senior, girls are going to be good at this. It's, we all know that we stink at, state management and React or something. So let's practice that.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting to me how much you get from this. I didn't really talk a lot about what you get from practicing as a team, but it's amazing. You get a team, sort of a camaraderie. You get a team knowledge growth. You get this sort of safety of being able to say, I don't know, but hey, let's practice that next time. And you start to you get an acceptance that oh, it's okay that I don't know everything. And it's crazy, but getting everybody there it's a longer practice. It's a longer really, it's a longer work.
Yeah, I feel like part of it too is that if you're really stretching yourself, then it's deliberate practice is hard the same way that like exercising is hard. It hurts and it's tiring. Um,
Yeah.
and so, people don't necessarily want to do it because it hurts and it's tiring.
Yes. Yeah, and as Ted was saying in the chat, that ensembling can accelerate the process, but it also can accelerate that fear of being found out that I'm a fraud because I've been working by myself for years, and that I've felt that. I'm sure most of us have felt that at one time or other, um, in our career, and so yeah, there's lots of tricks. I wish I had an easy answer, like, well, you just give them a bonus, but that doesn't help either. So let's try out some Sparrow decks because they're pretty excellent. So um, I'm gonna share. I'm gonna share where? Here we go. Let's share. I'm gonna try sharing that one. Okay. So here's what I'm gonna do. Uh, I'm gonna show you a picture of a sparrow, and it's either gonna be a house sparrow or a song sparrow, right? And I want you to say out loud, you're going to see a picture of a sparrow, and it's going to wait a few seconds, and then and you're going to say house, and then you're going to get feedback as to whether or not you're correct, right? And then you'll see another picture of a sparrow, and you'll say song, and you'll get feedback as to whether or not you're correct. Now, there's some really important parts of this. I want you to say it out loud, because there's a connection between the visual cortex and your brain and saying it that sort of reinforces that. And it doesn't matter if you're incorrect, right? Again, we were talking about the deliberate practice, and you have to want to learn. With this, we just want you to try, right? No one's keeping score, no one's pointing fingers, no one's going to be the best, whatever. So, but just try this, okay? And so again, you're going to see a sparrow. You're going to see one sparrow. You're going to say house. Say that,
House.
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 and you're going to get confirmation. Then you're going to see another sparrow, And you're going to say
song,
Song.
okay, and then you're going to get confirmation. So here we go. Let's try this, and you'll see that it's on a timer. So as we go, I'm just going to start it and let it go, and just do your best. Right?
song,
Song.
song,
Song.
house, song,
Song.
Song.
song,
House.
house, song,
House.
house,
House.
Song.
song,
Song.
Song.
song,
Song.
house,
Song.
house,
Song.
Song.
song,
Song.
house,
Song.
House.
House.
house,
Song.
song,
Song.
Song.
song,
Song.
house,
House.
house,
House.
house,
House.
Song.
Song.
song,
House.
house, house,
Song.
house,
House.
House.
house,
House.
house, house,
House.
So,
House.
house,
House.
house,
House.
song,
Song.
song,
House.
song,
House.
song.
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 song,
Song.
song,
House.
song,
House.
house,
House.
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 Song.
Song.
house,
Song.
song,
House.
song,
Okay. Oh, no. House. House.
house, house,
Song.
song,
Song.
song,
House.
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 house, house, song,
Song.
song,
House.
house, song,
Song.
song, house, song, 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 song,
House.
house, song,
House.
house, song,
Song.
song,
Song.
song,
House.
house,
Song.
house,
Song.
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 song, song,
Song.
song,
House.
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 house,
House.
song,
Song.
house, song,
Song.
song,
House.
house,
Song.
song,
Song.
house,
Song.
song,
Song.
song, house, house,
House.
house,
Song.
song,
House.
house, 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 house,
House.
house,
House.
house, song,
House.
house,
House.
song,
House.
house,
Okay. All right. So what do you think about that? How did you do? And it's not, I asked that just because we kind of grade ourselves, not that there's any real grade on it. What did you find about that?
I definitely wasn't at 100% at the end, but I was better than I was at the end than I was when I started.
Yeah. What else?
Well, the time for recognition and making a response, of course, speeds up as we go along.
Yeah, it did. Yeah, it did. Did you find it was getting easier as you were going along to kind of keep up?
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe so. I think again, the whole idea here is relaxed repetition, right? You're going to find, and Llewellyn has a fabulous video on this that I would highly recommend watching, where I think he was in Eastern Europe, but he did this in front of a large crowd, and it's fabulous. He explains it so much better. But one of the really great things, and it holds true, is that he says is from now on, you'll walk outside and these sparrows are pretty much pan world, whatever, they're everywhere. You'll see a sparrow and your brain, before you even think about it, will say house or song, right? Maybe you won't actually say that out loud, but there will be something there that will just like, I know what that is. It's house. Right? So the whole idea here, we talked about much earlier in the slides about moving the left brain functions closer to the right brain, right? So with this in mind and using this sort of repetition, uh, uh, relaxed repetitious practice. I have two others, and I'll give you a choice. We have long methods or we have clutter. Which one of those would you like to do? Well, this is much more, it'll be code based, so, but we'll get the same idea out of it. How about clutter? Clutter is always a great one. So let's let's go this, and okay, I'm gonna present there. Okay, so what I'm gonna do, in the beginning, what you're gonna find is you're gonna try and read the code, right? And figure out what it does, because that's what we do. We're developers, we love that. You're not gonna be able to do that, right? But in the beginning, you're gonna see some code and you're gonna say it's either relevant, if this is relevant in terms of the amount of clutter and how easy it is to read, or you're gonna say clutter, right? So with this, we say
Relevant.
relevant, thank you. And you'll get the feedback. And then you'll see some code and you'll say
Clutter.
Clutter.
And you'll get the feedback. Okay. So again, and I didn't mention this, but try and make a decision as soon as you see the code. As you know, it's like don't kind of hang back and wait till you get the affirmation of which one it is. Right? Really try and enunciate what that is as soon as you think you have an answer. All right, so let's give this a shot. A sec here. Okay.
Relevant.
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 Clutter.
Clutter. Relevant.
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 Relevant. Clutter.
Clutter.
Relevant.
Clutter.
Relevant.
Relevant. Clutter. Clutter. Relevant. Relevant.
Relevant.
Clutter.
Relevant.
Relevant. Relevant.
Clutter.
Clutter.
Relevant.
Relevant.
Clutter.
Clutter.
relevant,
relevant,
clutter,
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 relevant,
clutter,
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 Clutter.
clutter, clutter,
relevant,
relevant,
clutter,
clutter,
relevant,
relevant, clutter,
clutter,
clutter, clutter,
relevant,
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 relevant, clutter, clutter, clutter,
relevant,
relevant,
clutter,
clutter, relevant,
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 relevant, clutter,
relevant,
relevant, irrelevant, clutter,
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 clutter, relevant, relevant, clutter, 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 clutter,
relevant,
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 Oh, look at that. Yeah.
clutter,
clutter, relevant, clutter, relevant, relevant, relevant,
relevant,
clutter, relevant,
Clutter.
clutter, clutter, clutter,
relevant,
relevant,
Clutter.
relevant,
relevant,
clutter,
Clutter.
clutter,
Clutter.
clutter,
clutter,
relevant,
relevant,
clutter,
yes,
clutter, relevant, clutter,
relevant,
clutter, clutter, clutter,
Clutter.
clutter, clutter,
Clutter.
clutter, 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 clutter,
pattern,
Clutter. Clutter.
clutter, clutter, relevant, clutter, clutter, clutter,
clutter,
clutter,
Clutter.
clutter,
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 yes,
clutter,
Right. So what did you think of that one?
that was fun.
I need to do that for our code base.
Yeah. So here's the thing that I really like about them and why I like to use them. Because I mean, the more you go through this, the more you'll start like that's why I turned off my mic because I know the answers, you know. I still like to say them to myself because it reinforces when I'm right and wrong. But I didn't, you know, I didn't want to totally give away all the answers. But it's not really about reading the code, right? Let's see if I can find one. It's about it's about looking at this and saying, you know, scanning through your code, you're scanning, you're scanning. Whoa, wait a minute. I don't know what's wrong there, but something in my mind was like clutter. I don't know why. Let's take a minute. Let's step back and look at it. Or where was those great ones that that everybody like I kept getting wrong, and I know everybody else was too. It's my favorite one. Nope. Like, okay, clutter, right? Why is it clutter? Because this bottom one it's unused. It doesn't need to be there, right? I think it was near the end, so maybe. Here's a great one. Clutter. Why is it clutter? Right? In the end, we just
pet
want
peeves.
That could be, yeah.
right? Because you could just return whatever's in the if statement.
Yep.
It's the same as doing the if return true, else return false, right? And so, and that's kind of irrelevant for the practice. The practice is training your brain, moving from that slow brain to the fast brain, this ability to sort of like scan the code and go, oh, wait, something's there that's not quite right. Let's stop and take a look at it. And that's really all you want, right? And so on Llewellyn's site, and I put a link in here Oh yeah, on Llewellyn's site, and if you just search Sparrowdex, you could get to his blog post about it. He's got a lot of them, and I think he even actually has a template that allows you to create your own, for other things. But it's really a good practice just to get together and this might be one we were talking about how to get those people who don't want to code in front of others or don't want to be part of learning. This is kind of fun enough that maybe it's not, they're not going to feel like, well, I don't want to learn. I don't have to learn coding. Yeah, okay. Well, then come do something fun with us. So, yeah. Thoughts, questions, comments?
How how do you how do you use linters in this case, or with this kind of deliberate practice? Where do linters and that kind of stuff fit in? Yeah, go ahead.
I'm not sure what you're asking.
I'm just thinking that a lot of these clutter and so forth, if you have a linter and you run that, that will give you a warning or so having a linter and having everyone run it, or even having that as part of your CI or whatever, that you
It
can
might.
check something in. Yeah, how does that fit?
I don't think a linter is going to catch this and go, hey, this is wrong. Because, a linter is looking for syntax and, things like that. And I don't even know that something like, there's a tool that a lot of companies run that will, when you do a commit, will tell you, here are some problems with your code base, et cetera.
Yeah.
Like Sonar
Yeah,
Cube.
I guess my broader question is kind of because on the one hand, that to me it seems like it's good practice to
Yeah,
have those kind of linters and have those checks.
sure.
But what you're doing here with deliberate practice is different, I think, but it's still related. So maybe
Yeah.
it's the broader relationship between the two.
Right. If you use that, I don't think this takes the place of it. Sonar, that's the one I was
Yeah.
thinking of. Yeah. But I don't know that Sonar would say, hey, there's a bad thing here. It might. I haven't used it enough and I don't know how to apply the rules and that sort of thing. But the idea here is to train ourselves when we're scanning the code to just get a little better at it and not replace those tools because I think those tools can be necessary. But I also think that if we wholly rely on those tools, we don't we don't get better again. And the other thing is I'm talking about scanning the code, but when I'm writing the code, if I was to write something like that, I would hope that there would be a little bit of a red light that goes off in my brain that goes, oh, wait a minute, before I even get to Sonar or anything else. And so that it's improving the code I'm writing as it goes in, not after the fact.
Yeah.
Also, most of the linters are super configurable, and so like maybe the default rules don't filter stuff out that I want filtered out. But if I've trained over time to be like, no, I really don't like that. That doesn't work for me for whatever reason. If I have that built-in intuition, then maybe I can go and configure the linter to help me remember to do that. But
Yeah.
out of the box, maybe the linter doesn't do what I want.
And
Yeah,
how
the
easy is
classic
it?
one was when it would flag test names as being too long. You have to go and turn that off.
Yeah. Well, and again, how hard is it to override that? The dash skip, skip sonar flag. It's like if the tool is the problem or the tool is stopping us and we don't know why, there's a chance that we're going to try and skip over it. Whereas this is a way to train our brains to at least be, I'd like to say, uncomfortable when you see something like this. Again, maybe you don't know why. So yeah, but good question there.
Any practical advice in terms of doing this a little bit every day or once a week or
So so two things out of that. One, once a week is fine. I think if you set aside dedicated time, once a day could be a little too much for, especially if you're only doing Sparrow decks. I think you should be learning all the time. I'll caveat with that. But if you're setting aside we did once a week, twice a week, you know, um, we did learning hours. Um, Also, if it's important, do it first, right? If learning is important to you and your team and your company, do it on Monday or Tuesday in the morning. And that way, then you can take this learning, all that clutter, relevant stuff that we just went through, you're going to apply that the rest of the week, right? Anytime you write a kata as a practice together as a team, you're going to apply that the rest of the week as opposed to putting it on Friday afternoon when people are heading out and they're tired and it's been a long day and they just sort of maybe they show up. And then even if they do, what was that thing that we worked on Friday? It was something about clutter. Well, whatever. This is so if learning is important to you and your team, do it first. Do the important stuff first. Maybe there's more important things like, meeting with your manager or whatever. That's fine. Do it Monday morning, do it Monday afternoon, do it Tuesday morning. Don't put it off until Friday because that immediately tells everybody on the team that it's not important. It's just a thing it's a perk, hooray, but it's not important enough that we're actually going to make it a priority. So if anything, that's what I would push. That's my biggest, strongest thing. Whatever learning you do it early in the week.
The advice I give teams that I was coaching was if you work in iterations or sprints or some kind of time box, don't ever put it towards the end of the time box. Always put it at the beginning because it'll always get pushed out for, we have to get this work in, we have to get these stories finished. And so you always put it off.
Yeah. And in terms of convincing, like if I ask for an hour a week of learning time, do you know what percentage of our week that is? What percentage of our production work time that is? It's 5%. If I went to my manager and said, would it be okay if the team takes 5% of their production time to get better, to learn so that our code gets better? The manager would be like, yeah, okay. I used to do a talk called Creating a Culture of Learning. And the first question would be, if you're a manager in the room, what percentage of the time do you want your team to learn and grow and get better outside of production work, or during production hours? And I would hear like 10%, 20%. I'm like, I want to come work with you. 20%. That's crazy. That's like a whole day long. I bet that team is amazingly awesome. But, you don't even have to get 10%. You could get 5%. And that's like in terms of getting the okay from your manager, that's a pretty easy ask.
All right. Well, I think we're about out of time for the usual meetup, but thanks, Paige,
Thank you.
for the talk, and everyone for the great questions and discussion afterwards.
Yeah, really appreciate it. Paige, I think you're our return speaker, right? I think you've
Yes.
spoken for us once before, so please come back. This was awesome. And if you want to share that the link with me, I will gladly put it up on the meetup chat.
Yeah, I'll put it here in the chat.
Oh, perfect.
Then you can stick it up on the meetup page. That would be excellent.
Perfect. Great. Thank you so much, Paige.
Thank you.
Take care, everybody. Thanks for coming.
All right.
Yeah, thank you. Bye-bye.